touching that phone. That your hand doesn't belong in a place like this.
Hey, settle down. Stop recording me. Stop. Leave her alone. Back up. You need to step away.
This is ridiculous.
Sir, miss, let's move toward the door, please.
Someone
call the police.
On January 25th, 2025, detectives in Scottsdale, Arizona, executed a carefully orchestrated arrest at an upscale townhouse following an explosive confrontation at a local Chipotle 3 days prior. This incident serves as a piercing examination of how racial bias, unchecked entitlement, and physical aggression intersect with constitutional protections and criminal liability, illustrating how swiftly a verbal exchange over symbolic apparel can spiral into felony-level consequences. Understanding the legal mechanics of this case dismantles a pervasive misconception that affluence, respectability, or a clean record offer immunity when prejudice overrides restraint in a public setting. The lunch rush at the Chipotle on North Scottsdale Road surged with the usual cadence orders shouted over stainless steel counters, the hiss of tortillas hitting the press, the low hum of conversation layered over pop music bleeding from overhead speakers. 42 patrons occupied tables scattered across the dining area on the afternoon of January 22, 2025. Among them sat a young couple near the east-facing windows. A black man in his mid-20s wearing a navy baseball cap embroidered with the letters BLM in gold thread, and his girlfriend across from him, her phone resting face down beside a half-eaten burrito bowl. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, if you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because stories like these deserve to be heard, and your support helps bring more truth to light. Also, you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of racist messing with the wrong people and finding out. Victoria Brennan entered at approximately 1:17 p.m. Her designer handbag slung over one shoulder, sunglasses still perched atop her head despite the interior lighting. She ordered a salad bowl, no beans, extra fajita vegetables, and carried her tray toward the seating area, her gaze sweeping across occupied tables with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to claiming space. Her eyes snagged on the cap. She slowed. The young man glanced up briefly, registering her stare with the reflexive caution of someone who had learned to read tension in public spaces. His girlfriend noticed the shift in his posture, followed his sightline, and saw Victoria standing 3 tables away, still staring. Victoria set her tray down 2 tables over. She did not sit. Instead, she pivoted, her expression hardening into something sharp and deliberate, and walked directly toward their table. The young woman's hand moved instinctively to her phone. The question came first, a pointed inquiry about whether the cap was meant to provoke, whether wearing it into a place where families eat showed any respect at all. The young man responded evenly, his tone flat, non-committal. A boundary assertion, the cap was his, the statement was his, and the conversation was over. Victoria's voice climbed. Heads turned. The phrase, "thug hat," cut through the ambient noise like a blade, sharp enough to silence the table beside them. The young woman lifted her phone, screen illuminated, camera active. Victoria's hand shot out. The slap was not a swipe, it was a lunge, full-bodied and committed, her palm connecting with the phone's edge and sending it spinning across the tile floor in a skittering arc. The crack of impact echoed. Gasps rippled outward. The young woman lurched from her seat, scrambling after the device as it came to rest near the beverage station, screen shattered in a spiderweb of fractured glass. The young man rose. His posture shifted, protective, not aggressive, as he stepped between Victoria and his girlfriend, one hand raised in a stopping gesture. He told her to back off, His voice carried no threat, only insistence. Victoria shoved him, both palms against his chest, a two-handed push that forced him back half a step. He steadied himself without retaliating, his arms still raised, his stance grounded. Around them, phones emerged from pockets and purses like synchronized reflex cameras, angling, recording, capturing the scene from 5 different vantage points. Victoria did not stop talking. She justified herself to the crowd, forming at the periphery, her voice climbing into indignation, words tumbling over one another in a cascade of self-righteousness. She was standing up for real Americans. She was tired of people like him making everything political. She was defending her right to speak her mind in her own country. The young man did not engage. He placed himself between Victoria and his girlfriend, who had retrieved her phone and was now recording again, hands shaking, the cracked screen still functional. Restaurant staff pushed through the growing cluster of onlookers, a shift manager in a black polo, a line cook still holding tongs, both urging everyone to calm down, threatening to call the police if the situation escalated further. Victoria turned her fury on them next, demanding to know why they were defending these people, why no one seemed to care that she was being harassed. Her gestures grew wilder. Her volume increased. The overhead security camera recorded it all in silent, dispassionate clarity. Her initial approach, the pointed glare, the lunge for the phone, the shove, the unraveling. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Victoria froze, her expression flickering between defiance and something closer to alarm. Then she moved abruptly, decisively pushing past the line cook and striding toward the exit. She muttered as she went, loud enough for bystanders to catch fragments. People like them, ruining everything, always making scenes. She left the restaurant at 1:32 p.m., her salad untouched on the table. By 6 p.m., the videos had begun their migration across platforms. TikTok hosted the first upload, a 47-second clip showing the slap, the shove, and Victoria's tirade, captioned with 3 words, "Racist Karen Alert." Within 2 hours, it had logged 15,000 views. By midnight, the count exceeded 200,000. Duplicates and reaction videos proliferated. Comment sections filled with identifications, speculation, outrage. Someone in the original crowd had photographed Victoria's license plate as she climbed into her white Audi Q5 in the parking lot. That image circulated separately, passed hand to hand through Reddit threads and Twitter posts, eventually landing in the inbox of a Scottsdale Police Department tip line at 11:43 p.m. Victoria, meanwhile, sat across from her live-in partner at the granite island in her townhouse kitchen, recounting the incident over reheated pasta. She framed it as provocation. The young man had gotten in her face, she explained. His girlfriend had invaded her privacy by recording without permission. She had simply defended herself, stood her ground, exercised her rights. Her partner listened, his expression neutral, non-committal. He asked if anyone had taken video. She waved the concern away. Even if they had, she insisted, the context would vindicate her. People would see she was the victim. She scrolled her phone briefly before bed, noticed nothing alarming in her notifications, and retired to her bedroom at 11:15 p.m. The incident, she believed, had concluded. 3 miles away, a detective assigned to the case reviewed the compiled footage for the 4th time. 6 videos from 6 angles, plus the overhead security feed provided by Chipotle's district manager. The timestamps aligned. The sequence was unambiguous. By 1 a.m., the case file included preliminary charges: assault, criminal damage to property, disorderly conduct. The detective noted the language captured in the video's thug hat, Real Americans, people like them. Arizona revised statutes permitted sentencing enhancements when bias motivated an offense. The evidence was building toward more than a misdemeanor. Victoria slept soundly. The detectives did not. 72 hours would pass before the knock came. 72 hours for the videos to metastasize, for the tips to accumulate, for the legal machinery to align its gears with methodical precision. Victoria Brennan spent those days in the insulated certainty of her routine morning coffee, conference calls, evening wine on the patio, unaware that the investigation had already named her, located her, and prepared for her. The law does not forget. It simply waits for the right moment to remember. The knock arrived at 9:47 a.m. on January 25th, firm and deliberate, three measured strikes that carried the weight of official business. Victoria Brennan stood in her kitchen, ceramic mug halfway to her lips, and assumed the sound meant a delivery. Amazon, perhaps, or the meal kit service she had subscribed to in December. She set the mug down, smoothed her athleisure top, and crossed the tiled foyer in bare feet. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, two silhouettes stood motionless. She unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door inward, her expression already shaped into casual annoyance. Two detectives stood on her doorstep. Both wore plain clothes, business casual, badges clipped to belts. The taller one, a woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, offered a neutral smile that did not reach her eyes. Her partner, broad-shouldered and silent, held a tablet in one hand. They identified themselves, Scottsdale Police Department. They were there regarding an incident at Chipotle on North Scottsdale Road 3 days prior. They had questions. They had evidence. Victoria's annoyance shifted to confusion, then to something sharper. She stepped back half a pace. Behind her, footsteps descended the stairs. Her partner, drawn by the voices, his own confusion mirrored in his furrowed brow. The detectives did not wait for an invitation. The female detective outlined the situation with clinical efficiency, compiled video evidence from multiple sources, including TikTok uploads and restaurant security footage, witness statements, license plate identification. The investigation had established Victoria as the primary aggressor in an assault that resulted in property damage and physical contact. Her partner moved to her side, his posture defensive. He questioned their presence, their timing, their authority. Why now? Why here? What exactly did they think happened? The detectives exchanged a glance. The male detective tapped the tablet screen, angling it toward the doorway. A video played shaky handheld footage showing Victoria lunging forward, her hand striking the phone, the device clattering across tile. The audio captured her voice. "That thug hat doesn't belong in a place like this." Victoria's face drained of color. Her partner's jaw tightened. The charges came next, delivered in the same neutral tone. Assault, criminal damage to property, disorderly conduct. The female detective produced a printed Miranda rights card from her jacket pocket and began to read. Victoria was under no obligation to speak. Anything she said could be used against her in court. She had the right to an attorney. Her partner placed a hand on her arm, his grip gentle but insistent, a silent plea. "Stop talking, say nothing, let this unfold without fuel." Victoria ignored him. The words erupted in a torrent, indignant, self-justifying, unfiltered. This was insane. She had barely touched anyone. The young man had gotten in her face first. His girlfriend had provoked the whole thing by recording without permission. Victoria had simply stood her ground, defended her rights, refused to be intimidated by people wearing divisive symbols in public spaces. The detectives listened without interruption. The tablet recorded everything. Victoria's justifications spiraled deeper. She described the cap as a thug hat, labeled the young man a troublemaker, insisted she had been standing up for real Americans who were tired of divisive politics infiltrating everyday life. Her voice climbed with each sentence, her gestures growing wider, her certainty absolute. The male detective tapped the tablet again. A second video played a different angle, clearer resolution. Victoria's shove was unmistakable. Both hands against the young man's chest, his backward stagger, his arms raised in defense. The timestamp confirmed the sequence. She had initiated contact. She had escalated. Victoria's protests shifted. Were they charging him too? He had started it. He had invaded her space. Where was his accountability? The detectives responded with unchanging calm. The evidence showed otherwise. The videos, the witness statements, the manager's testimony all pointed to Victoria as the instigator. The young man had acted defensively, placing himself between Victoria and his girlfriend to prevent further harm. His actions fell within the bounds of justified force under Arizona law. Hers did not. The female detective explained the legal framework with the precision of someone who had delivered this speech many times before. Arizona revised statutes defined assault as intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, causing physical injury or offensive contact. Victoria's shove qualified. The phone's shattered screen qualified as criminal damage. Her continued verbal aggression in the restaurant qualified as disorderly conduct. But there was more. The detective referenced Arizona's hate crime statute's provisions that allowed for sentencing enhancements when bias motivated an offense. Victoria's own words, captured on multiple recordings, demonstrated racial animus. The references to thug, the dismissal of people like them, the framing of her actions as defense of real Americans. All of it provided the evidentiary foundation for prosecutors to pursue enhanced charges. Victoria's face twisted. She demanded to see the videos again, insisted the footage was incomplete, claimed she had been nervous and didn't remember everything clearly. The detectives obliged, replaying the clips in sequence. Each viewing narrowed her room for denial. Her partner stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. He advised her to stop talking, to invoke her right to silence, to request an attorney before saying anything further. The detectives had made their case. Further conversation could only deepen the damage. Victoria waved him off. She needed to explain. She needed them to understand. She had felt threatened. She had acted in self-defense. The young man's presence, his clothing, his very existence in that space had made her feel unsafe. The male detective noted her statements aloud, his tone clinical. Subject claims self-defense, based on perception of threat from victim's attire and presence. Subject describes victim using racially coded language. Subject acknowledges physical contact initiated by subject. Victoria's hysteria mounted. She demanded a jacket. It was cold, and if they were taking her somewhere, she needed to be comfortable. She asked about calling her attorney, about bail, about how long this would take. She insisted repeatedly that she had no prior record, that she was a respected member of the community, that this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by social media. The female detective disclosed the breadcrumb trail that had led them to Victoria's door. Anonymous tips submitted within hours of the incident, license plate photographs cross-referenced with DMV records, TikTok videos tagged with location data, the restaurant manager's cooperation with security footage requests. The digital age had transformed every public space into a surveillance network. Actions once fleeting now persisted indefinitely, catalogued and searchable. Victoria's partner made one final attempt to silence her. He reminded her of her rights, of the detective's warnings, of the danger in self-incrimination. But Victoria's need to justify, to defend, to assert her righteousness overrode caution. She continued to speak, each word another entry in the evidentiary record. The detectives exchanged a glance. The female detective stepped forward, handcuffs already in hand. She instructed Victoria to turn around, place her hands behind her back. The words carried no malice, no satisfaction, only procedural inevitability. Victoria's defiance collapsed. She asked if this was really necessary, if they couldn't just issue a citation, if her affluent address and clean record meant nothing. The detectives did not answer. The cuffs clicked into place with mechanical finality. Her partner stood frozen, helpless, as the detectives guided Victoria toward the unmarked sedan parked at the curb. She twisted back toward him, her voice breaking, demanding he call someone, fix this, make it stop. He nodded mutely, already reaching for his phone. The rear door opened. Victoria was guided inside, her movements stiff and awkward, with her hands restrained. The door closed. The engine started. The sedan pulled away from the curb at precisely 10:09 a.m., leaving her partner standing alone in the doorway, the morning sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Inside the vehicle, Victoria's ramblings began immediately muttered protests about injustice, about being targeted, about the unfairness of a system that punished honest reactions while coddling provocateurs. The detectives said nothing. The dashboard camera recorded everything. The law recognizes no hierarchy of citizenship. It does not exempt the affluent, the educated, the self-proclaimed upstanding. It measures actions against statutes, evidence against elements, and renders judgment without regard for perceived respectability. Victoria Brennan's assumption of immunity, rooted in decades of unchallenged privilege, had collided with a system designed to operate without deference. Her words, preserved across 6 videos and 1 patrol car recording, would become the prosecution's foundation. Her admissions, offered freely in the belief that explanation equaled exoneration, had sealed the case for hate crime enhancements. The young man she had assaulted remained unnamed in the police reports, identified only as Victim 1. His girlfriend, Victim 2. Their identities, for now, stayed sealed. But in the corridors of the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, a detail had surfaced during preliminary case review, a detail that would accelerate timelines, elevate priorities, and ensure that Victoria Brennan's case received the full weight of prosecutorial attention. The young man's father held a title, a position, a connection that transformed this from a routine assault into something far more consequential. Justice, it seemed, had found its catalyst. The patrol car merged onto the loop, 101, heading south toward the Scottsdale Police Department's headquarters on Civic Center Plaza. Victoria Brennan sat in the rear compartment, her hands still cuffed behind her back, her body twisted at an awkward angle against the seat. She muttered continuously, a stream of consciousness monologue delivered to no one in particular, captured in crisp digital clarity by the vehicle's interior camera. She described herself as an innocent homeowner, a taxpayer, a person with no priors, no history of trouble, no reason to be treated like a criminal. She lamented the loss of simple freedoms, the ability to speak her mind, to react authentically, to exist in public without constant surveillance. The unfairness of it all pressed down on her like physical weight, and she vocalized every ounce of that pressure. The detectives in the front seats said nothing. They had heard variations of this script dozens of times before. The shock, the indignation, the desperate scramble for moral high ground. None of it would matter. The evidence had already spoken. The drive took 17 minutes. During that time, Victoria cycled through denial, self-pity, and occasional flashes of defiant anger. She insisted the young man had provoked her, that his cap was inherently aggressive, that she had every right to object to divisive symbols in shared spaces. She complained about the handcuffs, about the temperature in the car, about being denied the opportunity to explain herself fully at her home. What she did not know, what the detectives had not disclosed, was the identity embedded in the case file awaiting her at the station. Victim 1. The son of Arizona's State Attorney General. The detail had surfaced during routine background checks conducted as part of the investigation. The young man had never mentioned it. He had given his statement without reference to family connections, without invoking privilege or demanding special treatment. He had simply recounted the facts, provided his contact information, and left with his girlfriend, her shattered phone wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. But the connection existed, and once flagged, it had triggered a cascade of procedural shifts. The case moved from the general assignment queue to a senior prosecutor's desk. Timelines compressed. Review processes accelerated. The charges, initially straightforward misdemeanors with potential felony upgrades, now carried the implicit weight of institutional scrutiny. Victoria Brennan had assaulted the wrong person. Not because his identity should have shielded him, the law does not operate on such hierarchies, but because his quiet endurance, his refusal to retaliate, his calm cooperation with investigators would be backed by a father whose professional life revolved around ensuring that justice, once engaged, followed through without compromise. The sedan pulled into the secure bay at police headquarters at 10:26 a.m. Victoria was escorted through a side entrance, past administrative offices and holding areas into the processing wing. The detectives handed her off to booking officers, who guided her through the ritual of intake: fingerprinting, mugshot photography, property inventory. Victoria's shock deepened with each procedural step. She asked repeatedly if this was standard, if everyone went through this, if there was any way to expedite the process. The booking officers responded with practiced neutrality. Everyone went through this. There were no shortcuts. Her belongings, phone, wallet, wedding ring, watch, were catalogued and sealed in a manila envelope. Her fingerprints were scanned electronically, then rolled in ink as a backup. The mugshot camera flashed twice, once facing forward, once in profile. Victoria's expression in both images was identical: stunned, disbelief, frozen into permanence. While she waited in a holding cell for her initial appearance before a magistrate, prosecutors reviewed the compiled evidence. The videos, the witness statements, the bodycam footage from her arrest, all of it painted a consistent picture, but it was her own words that elevated the case beyond routine assault. Arizona Revised Statutes Section 13701 provided for enhanced sentencing when an offense was committed with the intent to intimidate or terrorize based on race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender, or disability. Victoria's statements, captured on 6 separate recordings, demonstrated clear racial animus. The reference to thug hat, the dismissal of people like them, the framing of her actions as defense against divisive symbols worn by black individuals, all of it met the statutory threshold. The assault charge, initially a Class 1 misdemeanor, could escalate to aggravated assault if prosecutors demonstrated that Victoria's actions were motivated by bias. The potential sentence expanded from 6 months to multiple years. The criminal damage charge, tied to the shattered phone, added additional exposure. The disorderly conduct charge, while minor, rounded out the narrative of escalating aggression in a public space. Victoria's assumption of immunity, rooted in her clean record, her affluent zip code, her self-perception as a respectable citizen, had no bearing on the legal analysis. The law measured actions against elements. Bias plus physical harm equaled enhanced liability. Her own admissions had provided the necessary proof. In the holding cell, Victoria's thoughts spiraled through regret and disbelief. She replayed the incident obsessively, searching for moments where a different choice might have altered the outcome. Walking away, ignoring the cap, staying silent when the girlfriend started recording. Each hypothetical branched into a reality where she was still free, still anonymous, still insulated from consequence. But those realities did not exist. The choices she had made to confront, to escalate, to justify, had locked her into this singular trajectory. And the digital permanence of her actions meant there was no ambiguity to exploit, no he said, she said, to navigate. The truth existed in high definition, time-stamped and geotagged, accessible to anyone with an internet connection. The videos had already gone viral. Her name, initially withheld by police, had been identified through internet sleuthing within hours of her arrest. Screenshots of her mugshot circulated on Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok, accompanied by commentary ranging from schadenfreude to moral condemnation. The label, Racist Karen, followed her name in every thread. Her employer, a mid-sized consulting firm, had already been tagged in dozens of posts demanding her termination. Her LinkedIn profile, once a curated showcase of professional accomplishments, now hosted a growing list of comments questioning her judgment and character. The reputational damage was total and instantaneous. Victoria contemplated the fallout: job loss, social ostracism, the permanent stain of a criminal record. She had spent 42 years building a life defined by respectability and comfort. A single moment of unchecked bias had dismantled it all. The magistrate appeared via video link at 1:15 p.m. Victoria, now wearing a standard-issue jumpsuit, stood before the camera in the holding cell, her hands no longer cuffed, but her posture still rigid with shock. The magistrate reviewed the charges aloud: assault, criminal damage to property, disorderly conduct, with potential enhancements, pending prosecutorial review. Bail was set at $10,000. Victoria's partner, contacted by her attorney, arranged payment within the hour. She was released at 3:30 p.m. with conditions: no contact with the victims, no return to the Chipotle location, mandatory court appearances. She walked out of the police headquarters into blinding afternoon sunlight, her partner waiting at the curb in his sedan. She climbed into the passenger seat without speaking. He did not ask questions. The silence between them was thick with unspoken recrimination. As they drove back toward the townhouse, Victoria stared out the window at the passing landscape strip malls, office parks, the sprawling subdivisions of North Scottsdale. Everything looked the same. Nothing was. The young man whose cap had sparked the confrontation learned of Victoria's arrest through a text from the lead detective. The message was brief: subject in custody, charges filed, proceeding to arraignment. He showed the message to his girlfriend, who sat beside him on their apartment couch, her replacement phone already in hand. She nodded, her expression unreadable. They had not discussed his father's involvement. He had not asked for special treatment, but he understood, in the quiet way that children of powerful figures understand such things, that his last name carried weight beyond his control. Justice, in this case, would be thorough, not because he had demanded it, but because the system, once engaged, operated with methodical completeness. His father's position ensured that every procedural step would be followed. every evidentiary avenue explored, every sentencing enhancement considered. Victoria Brennan had assaulted an ordinary citizen. The law would have responded regardless, but she had also, unknowingly, assaulted the son of the state's chief prosecutor. That detail did not change the legal analysis. It simply guaranteed that the analysis would be exhaustive. In the days following her release, Victoria remained sequestered in her townhouse, avoiding calls, ignoring emails, watching her world contract in real time. Her attorney outlined the path ahead: arraignment, plea negotiations, a potential trial. The hate crime enhancements complicated everything. A plea deal might spare her prison time, but the conviction would follow her indefinitely. She searched for solace in the idea that she had been provoked, that the young man's cap had been inherently aggressive, that she had simply reacted as any reasonable person would. But the videos replayed endlessly across social media told a different story. They showed a woman lunging, shoving, justifying violence with language that left no room for interpretation. The law does not measure reasonableness by subjective perception. It measures actions against objective standards. Victoria's feelings of threat, divorced from any actual threatening behavior, did not justify assault. Her discomfort with symbolic speech, however genuine, did not authorize physical retaliation. True strength, the narrator of her unraveling would later observe, lies not in dominating the debate, but in disengaging to preserve one's liberty. Victoria had chosen dominance. She had paid the price. Weeks later, as plea negotiations stalled and trial preparation began, Victoria sat alone in her attorney's conference room, reviewing the evidence for the dozenth time. The videos played on a laptop screen, her lunge, her shove, her voice rising in indignation. She watched herself become the villain of her own story, frame by frame, and understood with sickening clarity that no explanation would undo what the footage showed. The young man's hidden identity, revealed to her only during discovery, added a final layer of cruel irony. She had not just attacked a stranger, she had attacked someone whose quiet connections ensured that her case would be prosecuted with unyielding thoroughness. Poetic justice, some might call it. Victoria called it a nightmare from which she could not wake. The law had spoken. The evidence was clear. The outcome was inevitable. All that remained was the sentencing.